130 miles southwest of Paris and a few minutes motoring time out of the old city of Le Mans is the Circuit of the Sarthe. It consists of 8.5 miles of main roads, and although it is a permanent circuit with concrete and brick stands, it is used only once a year. In the middle weekend of June, the Circuit of the Sarthe becomes the focal point of interest for the motoring enthusiasts of the world. It is the scene of Les 24 Heures du Mans. A very special motor race, this. Not only does it last for 24 hours, but it is run according to a strict code of rules. For instance, all competing cars must use the same pump fuel, hence the huge petrol installation feeding the fuel lines to every pit. A car can only be refueled after each 32 laps or 268 miles. Otherwise it is disqualified, and all the genius put into its design and the toil and concentration of the men who drive it and manage it from the pit is wasted. Le Mans is a race for sports cars. Many, like these MGs, are prototypes of new models which will eventually go into quantity production. In makeshift headquarters dotted about the countryside, the cars assemble for final preparation and the team manager comes into his own. His is a great responsibility, for of all motor races, Le Mans is the most international. Its prestige value is enormous, a fact certainly not lost to the manufacturers. An impressive sight, the preparation of the 5 Porsches entered, Germany's most successful post-war sports car developed from the people's car of Hitler's Reich. Air-cooled engine mounted at the rear, lightweight, streamlined shape, a formula which was to prove tremendously successful. Now, in the city itself, the mood of the race becomes apparent. There's an unofficial headquarters at Le Mans, and needless to say, it's a cafe restaurant. With 5 days to go to 4 o'clock on Saturday, faces seen year by year begin to reappear. The MG boys take time off from their stable, and Ted Lund, as a reserve, wonders if he'll get a drive or not. Jack Fairman of Bristol knows he will, and can sign his autograph against his picture in the printed program. Beckard and Gazzanides of Monte Carlo fame. Rolt of Jaguar, Freeman of Dunlop, and Gerald Lascelles, who's fond of motoring. As the hours slip gently past towards the start, the tide that carries us to Le Mans is on the flood. Now, here's an annual problem in that crowded square. After you, chum? Non, après vous, monsieur. Car enthusiasts of all nations. A young Parisian couple, and from London, young film actress Susan Stephen with her husband Larry Ward. Spirits are high and courtesy abundant, for now Le Mans is all in festive mood. So long, chum. See you at the circuit. By Thursday afternoon, even the drivers are buying programs. Meanwhile, the practice times are front-page news in all the papers, and the race is the topic of conversation at every table and bar in town. You don't have to know the language, so long as you know that the hippodrome is a point on the circuit and not a theatre. Vive le sport! Vive l'entente cordiale! Another focal point of pre-race interest is the scrutineering bay. The 3 Triumph TR2s impressed the knowledgeable spectators on the rails with the smartness of their turnout. They looked as if they'd been prepared for a motor show rather than a 24-hour grueling against the clock. Scrutineering is an exact term for an exact procedure, for here every car is checked in the most minute detail to ensure that it complies with the regulations. The officials of the Automobile Club de l'Ouest are highly qualified experts at the job. Cars are entered in classes according to their engine size. There's a handicap section calculated on capacity too, and all this must be checked. Alfred Neubauer, team manager of Mercedes, enters the lists. Behind him, Pierre Levesque. Only once before, in 1952, had Mercedes won here. But the new Merc had already won the Mille Miglia in the hands of Sterling Moss. And for this race, Moss was to share the wheel with world champion Fangio of the Argentine. Against the Germans, Jaguar. Mike Hawthorne heading the team with Rolton Hamilton, who won in '53 and were second in '54. Millionaire sportsman Briggs Cunningham from the States had also entered a Jaguar with a car of his own construction. And Johnny Clay's Belgian entry brought the Jaguar strength to 5. The 4.4-litre Ferrari was to head the Italian attack, and the moment of dispute drew nearer hour by hour. There's an airfield immediately behind the main grandstands at Le Mans, and on the Saturday morning of the start, it must be one of the busiest in Europe. By 11 a.m., 100,000 people are on the scene. There are still 5 hours to go. In the town, every hotel and spare room in private houses has been booked up months ago. Far simpler to spend the 24 hours in the open, particularly if you haven't got a car. By noon, 150,000 people have arrived. The weather promises to be perfect. It's June in central France and the midday sun is hot. 4 hours to go. There's certainly no need to hurry over lunch. It's difficult to concentrate on eating after the race has started. That's still in 3 hours' time. And the crowd is now up to the 200,000 mark. Now there's a separate buzz of interest as each car swings in from the paddock to splutter and blast its way gingerly through the crowd towards the pit. The Mercedes are pushed in, led by the Fangio Moss car. As Ken Richardson backs his TR2 to the pit, there are 2 hours to go before the start. Now the white and blue racing colors of the Cunningham entry carry the hopes of 2,000 American spectators. The final touches of preparation are conducted with unhurried calm. Spare parts and tools to be used during the race must be carried in the car. They are officially checked and an inventory is made. The Bristol is expected to cover about 2,000 miles during the race. Cars may change their tires, of course, but every wheel change means a loss of time. Time means distance, and Le Mans is won on distance covered. The car must be kept lapping on the road and lapping fast. There is only an hour and a quarter left before the start. In the Bristol pit, team manager Selby completes his preparations, and in the Jaguar pit, it's the same routine. Fuel, oil and water tanks are topped up, 37 gallons of petrol, 3.5 of oil. Then the tanks are officially sealed, and those seals can only be broken at the pit by the marshal, and that only after the car has completed 32 consecutive laps throughout the race. It's a regulation which has cost many a hope of victory in the past, and will do so again. Now there are 45 minutes to the start, and most drivers would rather chat than be alone. But any anxiety they may feel is well concealed, and Tony Rolt and Duncan Hamilton leave their final briefing in characteristic form. Parnell and Collins of Aston Martin keep an eye on Malioli of Colin Chapman of Lotus looks well pleased with life as usual, but Lance Macklin and his young American wife are thoughtful. And with 20 minutes to go, enter Fangio, world champion driver. The gendarmes have cleared the pit area of pass holders. The rest of the road is empty. 10 minutes to go. There are over 250,000 people at Le Mans. With the cars lined up by engine sires and parked in echelon, their motors silent, drivers begin to take up station opposite. There are 5 minutes to go. Pit gallery, counters, stands and terraces to the rails are jammed. 2 minutes to go. The crowd grows quiet. All eyes focus in one direction on one man who holds a flag. 1 minute, 45 seconds, 30, 15. At the S's, it's Castellotti in the lead. Jaguars, Hawthorne and Bowman, third and fourth. Number 19, Fangio, has made a bad start, and so has Tony Rolt. Rouge and still Castellotti's Ferrari. Mulsanne, the end of the 180-mile-an-hour straight, and Castellotti, Hawthorne, Malioli, Bowman, the American Jag, the Belgian Jag. The 2 liters through the same corner. Already in 2 laps, the race is faster than it's ever been. Faster than Grand Prix, and this is a Grand Prix of endurance. Castellotti's knocked a second off Gonzalez's record at 117.49 miles an hour, but Hawthorne's number 6 is holding him. Fangio has caught Malioli and now clips a further second off the new record, while way down in the field the TR2s and MGs start to mix it. At Tertre Rouge, leading to the straight, the field of 58 starters bunches into tight groups as the race falls into pattern. At Mulsanne and the end of the straight, after braking to 35 from up to 185 miles an hour, and they're still as close as sardines in a tin. But the little twin-boom Nardi from Italy gets more speed from its 730cc engine than its brakes can hold, finds the escape road and eventually the course. After 50 minutes, Hawthorn leads Fangio by that much, and they're trying. The Mercedes were using their phenomenal aerodynamic brake in reply to the British car's disc brakes, and to good effect. Operated by an hydraulic control at the driver's fingertip, the flaps had the same effect as dive brakes on an aircraft. Meantime, in the pits, the formidable task of lap charting and timekeeping to maintain strategic touch with this fantastic race. By now, the race average was faster than the previous year's record for a single lap, and Jaguar and Mercedes had come to grips. At 6 o'clock, after 2 hours racing, the order was Fangio and Hawthorn constantly changing position, followed by the Ferraris of Castellotti and Malioli, the Mercs of Kling and Levesque, and the Jaguars of Phil Walters, Tony Rolt and Don Bowman. Number 23, Peter Collins' Aston Martin, was chasing teammate Salvadori in 12th place. Now Castellotti began to fall back from the leaders, and Trantillon's car, the third Ferrari, was in trouble. The time was now coming for the fastest cars to refuel, for already several had completed the necessary 32 laps. Attention was therefore concentrated on the pit area, and it was here that disaster struck at Le Mans. As Pierre Levesque's Mercedes blazed at the roadside, it was impossible to realize that during those 3 stark seconds, so many people had died and were injured in this catastrophe. The race went on, and the Jaguars of Clays and Hawthorn, as well as Kling's Mercedes, were at this time in the pits. Opposite was the shattered wreck of Lance Macklin's Austin Healey, which Levesque's Mercedes struck, and that wreckage had to be moved. Ivor Bueb, newcomer to the team, in his first race in the car, had to take over Mike Hawthorn's Jaguar. Precisely what had happened, no one knew, though many were ready enough to talk. Moss, taking over from Fangio, had the Mercedes in the lead. As reports of the number of casualties spread abroad and the magnitude of the disaster was guessed at by those nearby, Les 24 Heures du Mans became front-page news throughout the world. At 8 p.m., the Fangio-Moss Mercedes led the Hawthorn-Bueb Jaguar by a lap. Malioli's Ferrari was third, Castellotti out of the hunt. The Jaguars of Hamilton and Bowman fourth and fifth, and Musset's 3-litre Maserati had displaced the other Merc, while Les Brook had come to grief at Arnage. Communication with the outside world became difficult. The telephone lines were jammed, but the authorities were calm and efficient. Dusk is always a difficult driving time. Judgment of distance in the half-light is trying at any speed. The leader was now lapping Le Mans at a consistent 119 miles an hour and was 25 miles ahead of his surviving teammate. Hamilton was closing on the Ferrari and Ivor Buer. Clays brought the Belgian Jaguar to the pit in good order, but the other private entry, Cunningham's, was beginning to show signs of wear. When Spatters rejoined the race, 4 Jaguars were still running and very much in the hunt. The race had run a quarter of its time. The leaders had covered over 700 miles and 11 cars had fallen by the way. Over the pits, the scoreboard revealed the facts. On the road, only the drivers knew the story. But Le Mans remains a public holiday, and the vast majority of people there had yet to learn what had happened in the pit area. With darkness, the heath surrounded by the road shimmers in the light of 1,000 naked bulbs. It's time to stretch the legs and change the scene. Wheels within wheels, indeed. And it's all just a question of balance. At 2 a.m. there are 36 cars left in the race and the Ferraris are all out. The Moss Fangio Mercedes leads by a lap and a half from the Hawthorne Buick car, now backed by Rolton Hamilton, who are third and have passed the other Merc. The full list of casualties from the disaster is announced. Stuttgart gives orders to Neubauer in the pit. The 2 Mercedes are withdrawn from the race. At first light, Tony Rolt is ready. The race is halfway run. Mike Hawthorne has established the new lap record in that early dice with Fangio, and his car is now 5 laps in the lead. But trouble comes to Jaguar. The Bowman Dues car is off the road, and now number 7 causes some concern. It's passed at the pit by Musso's Maserati, and now Peter Collins and Paul Frere bring the sole surviving Aston Martin into 3rd place. Rise and shine, boys. There have been some changes made. But at Le Mans in 1955, the traditional morning mass has special significance. And later, both Roman Catholics and Protestants join in prayer. Between 6 o'clock and 7, a tremendous fight between the Maserati and the Aston Martin. Number 16, Musso and Valenzano, number 23, Collins and Frere. The Aston got within 10 seconds of second place and then fell back. Now the amazing effort of the Porsches came to light, and Polenski's 1.5-litre car was 6. But with sunrise came the rain. Water, rubber dust and oil combined to make the circuit like a skating rink. And still the leader reached 180 miles an hour along the straight and slithered through the curves to lap with the same cool constancy as in the dry. Behind races the Aston Martin. Only seconds separated it from the intruding Italian Maserati, which itself was closing on the leading car. But at mid-morning, as another lap went up to Collins and Frere, the Maserati failed to restart from its pit, and the red car no longer separated the green ones at the front. At noon on Sunday at Le Mans, it is difficult to realize that there are still 4 hours to go. The Hawthorne-Buick Jaguar led by over 30 miles. Behind, the Aston Martin, then Clays and Svartas. The Bristol team remained intact, dominating the 2-litre class, but the 5 Porsches seemed unassailable in the 11 and 1500 classes. But the race at Le Mans is not over until 4 p.m. And with 2.5 hours to go, there was concern in the Bristol pit. First, second and third places in the class for the second year running were at stake. Peter Wilson at the wheel reflects team manager Selby's anxiety. The last hour, and even disappointed drivers cannot tear their eyes from the road. Jaguar, Aston, Jaguar, and in 4th place, the leading Porsche. On the Mulsanne straight, the engines still scream up to maximum revs after 23 hours of racing. Drivers are deaf to everything except the roar of power. Eyes prickle, hands ache. The corners still rush up to meet them. The pits fill up. The time is 3:45. Officials man their stations ready for the finish. Again, a hush descends upon the crowd. The clock over the pits ticks up to 4 o'clock.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Les 24 heures du Mans sont terminées.
22 surviving cars, 13 of them British, roll up to the checkered flag in the order in which the closing seconds find them. Each gets its own applause from the enormous crowd, for to have finished at all in this race is a distinct achievement. The Bristols arrive in line ahead, their target achieved. The MGs are one short. The Porsches have scored a major triumph. Polensky and Frankenberg have won on Index of Performance, the Handicap Award, and thereby take their place with Hawthorne and Buick, whose outright victory is unique. It is Jaguar's 3rd Le Mans. Hawthorne holds the new lap record. They have covered a record distance of 2,569 miles. But Aston Martin, Bristol, MG, TR2, Fraser-Nash, and the Little Cooper all wrote their names proudly in the story of that day. The circuit of the Sarthe is quiet again. The struggle has slipped into motor racing history. In 24 hours, the world has turned with its sun and shadow. Le Mans 1955 has run its course.